Yeah, there were definitely times where, in some sports that the height advantage really mattered, like for example, basketball, and sports like that. And it kind of hit me that I wasn't gonna be super tall, but that kind of just played a bigger part in me and my identity of honing into my skills, and I had to find ways around that height disadvantage, and it made me just work a little bit harder and to see things from a different perspective.
Welcome to episode number 2 of the Respect with Matt Gonsalves podcast. Mahalo for finding the pod and giving it a try. It's called the Respect Podcast, and it's my goal to bring you respectful, informative, and uplifting interviews. Today's show checks all those boxes. This week's guest is one of the most electrifying football players in Hawaiʻi high school history. He's a 2023 graduate of Kahuku High School, where he helped lead the Red Raiders to 2 Open Division state championship titles. At Kahuku, he lined up at receiver, kicker, kick returner, and running back. As a junior, he was named the Max Prep State Player of the Year and KHON's Cover 2 Marcus Mariota recipient. That year, he posted 79 catches for 1,179 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. Did I mention he is just 5 feet 6 inches tall? Much more than a football player, he graduated high school with a 4.0 GPA. After high school, he served a 2-year church mission to Japan. After initially committing to the University of Utah, he decided to join the Braddahhood at the University of Hawaiʻi. He is a wide receiver for the Rainbow Warriors and will be a redshirt freshman this fall. Of course, I am talking about Kainoa, Kaikai Carvalho. This is episode 2 of the Respect Podcast with Matt Gonsalves, and it's coming to you right now. All right, we are here with Kaikai Carvalho. Kaikai, how you doing? How's everything going?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me here today.
Hey, really stoked you could carve out some time for us this morning. Just to get started today, tell the audience a little bit about where you were born and where you grew up.
Yeah, so I was born actually in Utah, in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I was raised there until I was about 8 years old, and then moved to Laie when I was in the 4th grade, so about 9 years old.
Right.
And been here ever since.
Okay, cool. Tell me a little bit about the sports you played growing up.
Mm-hmm. So my parents were big on, putting me into sports and having me outdoors. So I think I played every possible sport every sport possible. I remember growing up playing, basketball, baseball, t-ball, soccer, and of course football and gymnastics as well. And so, and also golf.
Wow.
And so I was going into a lot of sports from a very young age, and been, sports have been my whole life basically.
Yeah, I heard about your gymnastics background because, that's obviously not a sport that a lot of young, men or boys try. What was that like, and how has that contributed to your overall, I guess, athletic abilities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think gymnastics is one of those sports where balance and your core strength is really required a lot. And it kind of built my athleticism from a foundation standpoint. That was like my main sport growing up in Utah. I would have practice, 5-6 times a week. And those were like 4-5 hour practices. And so I think just building that foundation from gymnastics with like agility wise, tumbling, just getting the body moving, I think gymnastics is a really good sport to, get your athletic ability up and going.
Nice. What how good do you think you could have been in gymnastics if you had stuck with it?
Well, when I was 8 years old, I won the Utah State Championship.
Wow.
In Utah, and so I was, pretty pretty good, I would say, at a young age, but yeah, I didn't really follow gymnastics after that. I know they have like, the Olympics and, the collegiate level, but I think for my body type, gymnastics fits me perfectly, and I think I could have made it pretty far.
Yeah, speaking of your body type, since you brought it up, I mean, yeah, you're listed at. I was looking at the roster. You're listed
Hmm.
at 5'6",
Hmm.
and I mean, I guess my question for you is, growing up, were you ever discouraged because of your size? I mean, at some point you probably realized, hey, I'm not going to be 6'2". Were you ever
Hmm.
discouraged about that?
Yeah, there were definitely times where, in some sports that the height advantage really mattered, like for example, basketball, and sports like that. And, it kind of hit me that I wasn't gonna be super tall, but that kind of just played a bigger part in me and my identity of honing into my skills, and I had to find ways around that height disadvantage, and it made me just work a little bit harder and to see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, I saw a clip. I think it's on your Instagram where you were talking to a couple of younger kids, and they were talking about size. And tell
Yeah.
me. I mean, what's your message to kids that that maybe aren't going to be that that 6'2", 6'5"? What's your message to them as far as still being able to pursue whatever they want to do?
Mhm. Yeah, I have a saying, it's called "heart over height." I've been using that since high school. It kind of stuck with me, but it's just talks about having that motivation and that effort to um, push yourself and to drive yourself no matter the circumstances. Um, for a smaller athlete like me, we're looked down upon, we're slept on, and so just having that chip on your shoulder and to prove to people that we can play and we have that heart and that drive to compete at the highest level. And so I think my message to those younger kids is just to believe in yourself, and to play with that grit and that chip on your shoulder.
Now that's awesome. Now let me ask you a little bit. Going back to the other sports you played, I believe you
Hmm.
played soccer. You mentioned soccer as one of them, and I believe you played soccer in high school. How good were you
Hmm.
at soccer, and how good could you have been if you had kind of focused more on that?
Yeah, so soccer was actually one of my favorite sports growing up. Um, I would run around with Lionel Messi jerseys and Neymar. I loved Neymar. I had the mohawk going in when I was a little. Um, but yeah, soccer is a great sport for me, and I played. Yeah, like you said, I played in high school, 4 years varsity, and made all OA teams my 3 years playing soccer. So I think if I stuck with it, I could have also been pretty good at it. But when I realized, maybe it was my junior or senior year, that this football was kind of taking over and soccer was just like an off season thing. And I was in a game versus Kalani, the over here. They're pretty ranked pretty high in the state, and just their movement and the way that they flowed, I knew. I was like, okay, this is probably not for me. They were just running circles around me. So, but yeah, soccer is a really fun sport, and I really enjoyed playing soccer growing up.
You mentioned your parents put you in all the different sports, and that kind of resonates with me because when we were growing up, my dad, he kind of had us try everything, tennis and all kinds of
Hmm.
stuff. What do you think of kids nowadays kind of specializing in one sport at an early age?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I kind of see this nowadays where kids play year round, and even with like football, the 7-on-7 circuits and things like that. But I think my parents did a really good job of putting us into a lot of sports. One that helps, you know, you find your passion. It's not forced. And then two, it also helps you build those skills that you can't really build in other sports. And so, looking back, I'm really grateful that my parents put me in a lot of different sports, to build those skill sets and also to find my passion at the end of the day, because it wasn't forced on me that I had to choose a certain sport. It kind of just grew what I love to do, and gave me that choice to choose my path. But ultimately, I think now kids nowadays specializing in a sport, it really helps them get a head start on that specific sport. it gives them a little extra work because they're playing year round, and so that's also a really good thing that I am considering maybe if I have future kids as well.
Right. So ultimately, football became your number one sport, and that's where you had your passion. And you go
Hmm.
on to, you're growing up in Laie.
Hmm.
And tell me about. I went to college with a guy named Mark Atuaya, who I'm sure you're
Ooh.
familiar with, and Mark
Yeah.
one time Mark told me, he goes, if you're not from Kahuku, if you're not from the North Shore, you don't understand how big football is for us. Tell me, just what does football mean for the people of the North Shore of Oahu and that Kahuku community?
Yeah, so we live in like our own little bubble, and if you're not from there, you can't really have that feeling. But it's just no feeling like it where you're growing up and these kids they don't even have favorite NFL teams or favorite college players. Their favorite players are the Koku players, the players on the high school team, and so you are like the pro team there in that community. You are that it's that kind of feeling. And so, growing up there and just watching those greats, and going to the games, it's a special kind of feeling, and it's all about football there. We're so prideful. We have so much spirit, and when the football team loses, the whole community feels like it lost and it's down. But when you win, the whole community is up and celebrating, horns honking, and everyone's out late at night. And so it's kind of it's a cool feeling where you're playing for more than yourself. It's for the community. It's for everyone that helped raise you and helped play a big part in you growing up.
What was it like to? I mean, I've been to a couple of Kahuku football games. I went to the state championship game a couple years ago when your brother, I think you in his senior year, maybe it was, yeah, about 2 years ago. And just watching the fans out there and just like this sea of red. What is that like to play in that? Because that's like, I mean, almost a college atmosphere.
Yeah, it kind of is that feeling where you're playing in like a college or a pro atmosphere. But Kahuku is such a legacy team. There's so much tradition. There's so much history with good players and legacy people. I had a couple uncles. Vaikai Carvalho and just like the people before you that played at Kahuku and keeping on that tradition. There's a lot of players on the team where they have the legacy name, and you just want to make your family proud, the whole community proud, and that's why they cheer so hard. It's because they want to see family succeed, and the whole team is rooted in community and family, and so that feeling of that extra cheer and that extra boost, I feel like that's what makes Kahuku special.
Yeah, and one of the unique opportunities you had and was to be able to play under your uncle Sterling, and I believe your dad Stuart was also on the coaching staff. What was it like to be coached by your dad and by your uncle in high school?
Yeah, it's definitely tough love, hard coaching, long nights, long talks with, both of them. But it was such a blessing because at the end of the day, they wanted me to succeed and they wanted me to have the best opportunities possible. And so, that's my junior year. That season was, something special because that was the first time I played under my uncle and my dad as my position coach. And so, that whole season panned out, just magical. Everything clicking on offense, the defense doing their thing, and my uncle it was the OC at that time, and my dad, helped run the plays and things like that, and so they were putting me in the best situations possible, and um, just working under them, it made it a lot more easier for me to want to do better and to give back to them, and because they poured so much coaching into me ever since I was little. They poured so much teaching and coaching into me, and so that was something special I got to do.
Did you ever have moments? You mentioned the tough love. Did you ever have moments where, the relationships were strained, or did you guys always figure out a way to keep keep the love strong.
Yeah, we definitely had our moments, I um but at the end of the day that's family, and so I still had to go back to my house and live under the same roof. So it kind of, what stayed on the football field stayed there, and then back home, I'm a son at the end of the day, and I love my father and my uncle, and so that kind of was like two different playing fields where I can express myself on the field, and then when we come home, home is home. And yeah.
Yeah, tell me. You did kind of mention your junior year, which you had an amazing year. But I want to go back 1 year prior because this was kind
Hmm.
of right in the middle of COVID, and you
Yeah.
ended up going and playing your sophomore year, I believe, in Utah. What
Yes.
factored into that decision, and how was that year for you?
Yeah. So Hawaii high school sports were all canceled during that my sophomore year, and my family and I took the decision to make the jump and go and play at Utah because their season was starting in about 2 weeks. And so me and my brother, we moved out to Utah, um, and it made it super easy because we had cousins there that lived in Utah and Lehigh, the Rosses, and Stanley Ross. He's my age, and we were the same class. And then his little brother Camilo Ross is my little brother's age, and so that transition made it super easy. And we ended up playing our sophomore year at Skyridge High School, and that's where that I love that year. That's where I kind of started to get a little bit more looks and start my recruitment process, especially with my cousin Stan Ross already having offers, and being a pretty highly recruited prospect. That kind of helped me to see that process going.
Yeah, it must have been a good year for you because you came back
Hmm.
the next year and had like a, really a record setting year. You were
Hmm.
player of the year in the state and all of that. Would you have considered staying at Skyridge for the rest of your career, or were you really just like, no way, I gotta play at Kahuku?
Yeah. So we had a moment where they postponed our season in um right before my junior year, and we were considering going back to Skyridge because we didn't want them to cancel the season again. But during that time, I was with all the boys from back home when growing up in Laie, playing with them and rough and tumble on the field, and I just had long talks with them, and kind of our vision was we didn't really play a full high school year together as all the boys, and so at the end of the day, I was like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be, and I ultimately stayed back home and played for Koku.
And obviously, that was a great decision. You went on to win
Yes.
a couple of state championships, I believe. Just sum up your entire Kahuku High School playing experience.
Hmm. Yeah, that decision ultimately led to that special year where all the boys ultimately stayed home, and it was such a special feeling just knowing that you had brothers left and right of you, and um, playing for each other and playing for that community, and just seeing the community rally together because COVID was really a hard time, and so it kind of brought life back into that community when we won those that state championship that first year, and then that next year, it didn't end up how I wanted to. I broke my ankle week 2, and then ultimately came back for the playoffs and won another state championship. And just that whole ride, those 2 years where Koku High School football and that community, the North Shore, just felt like it was on a high of positive energy and just happiness all around because like I said, when the football team wins, the community's winning, and so that was just a special 2 years that I experienced in my life.
And speaking of special 2 years, you're highly recruited out of high school, and you have opportunity to go play a variety of at a variety of schools. You choose to commit to Utah,
Mhm.
but after that, or in the midst of all of this, you decide to go on a church mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints.
Mhm.
Tell me what that decision making process was like.
Mhm. Yeah, so from a very young age, I always, was taught that I was gonna go on a mission, right? And then, that recruiting process started in high school, and um, a mission kind of came to the last of my thoughts. But with all the boys that I played with at Koku, and my uncle Sterling, he was a bishop at the time, and so that whole year, that junior year, we did service projects, we did church activities, we did um, community events for the love of the community and for the love of our hearts, and that I think that year really taught me that at the end of the day, football is football, but loving and serving people was the biggest thing, and just putting Christ first. And I really thank my uncle for that, being an example of a great leader. He had a position of being a head football coach, but also was fulfilling his calling as a bishop, and that trickled down to us. And about 10 of us boys, we had all those talks, and late night studies of the Book of Mormon and scriptures, um, and that ultimately led us to realize that we all these blessings are not just coming from nowhere, they're coming from the Lord. And um, we have to sacrifice what we love and to give back, because that's what the community raised us to do. And um, that's where our testimonies were built, was serving Christ and serving others. And so my friends obviously made a big influence too as well, but just personally, looking back at it, all those blessings, were coming from the Lord. And I knew I could sacrifice 2 years of my life to go serve him and his people that he needed me to serve.
Very cool. Tell us where you got called to and what that experience was like.
Yeah, so I was called to the Japan Sapporo mission, the Frozen Chosen. And what was interesting about that was, about 2 weeks before I opened my mission call, my mom's first cousin was called to be the mission president at the Sapporo mission. And so when I opened my call, my mom was bawling her eyes out. And I
Mm,
didn't know at the time that he was called, because I've only met him when I was like super young.
mm.
And so I opened my call, and then my mom was crying, and I gave her the microphone, and she's like, my first cousin was just called to be the mission president." And that's when I realized, like, wow, it's divine destiny. Like, there was no mistake there in the call, where I was going to go and serve under my family, go serve under family. And it was like, like high school, I served, I played under my uncle, and now I'm going as a missionary out there in a foreign country, foreign language, and then still serving under one of my uncles. And that made that whole experience even more meaningful and more like a blessing to my family. And yeah, that was just the start of an amazing journey.
Yeah, I imagine your mom being from Japan was
Mhm.
probably pretty stoked. And I believe your father served in Japan as well, right?
Yep. Yes, he served in Okinawa, Japan.
What what was that experience like? Like if you were to mention, a couple of takeaways or the biggest lessons you learned from your mission experience, what are they?
Mhm. Yeah. The biggest thing when I got there was just being humble, and the respect aspect of being in Japan. Um, Me being half Japanese, my like you mentioned, my mom is from Japan. Just getting to know the culture and was the biggest thing for me. But also, like, I felt like I kind of found a part of my identity that I didn't know was there. Like certain little things my mom would say that now I could understand, or her way of thinking. It kind of all made sense when I went out there, and just seeing how they were functioning out in Japan. And so that like a big thing for me was I kind of felt like I found part of my identity out there in Japan, and then also loving the people out there in Japan and having charity, um, was a main takeaway that I found in my mission, and just to love people for who they are and where they are, and being patient with them.
You know, I was growing up. I remember people used to always say, "Hey, BYU, they have this unfair advantage because all their players are older and stuff like that." But but there's
Yeah.
also, I mean, but it's not like you're out there playing football or any sport at a high level. How did you try to
Right.
keep in shape while you were out there?
Yeah, so we have an hour in the morning to exercise, and I took that hour seriously. Like, I told my companions, my roommates that, hey, like, I'm gonna go be playing sports after this, and let's get some work in. And so I kind of forced a lot of my companions to go on runs when it was warm enough to go on runs, and or sometimes they would ride the bike and I would run. But a lot of push-ups, calisthenic work, and yeah, just it's not at a super high level, like high intensity workouts, but you got to make the best of it, and the Lord will take care of the rest.
When you got back from your mission, like, could you tell, like, I mean, did your body like really fall behind, or do you feel like you came back in pretty good shape?
Yeah, I felt personally like I was a little bit sloppy when I came back from the mission. About a week after I came back, I already hopped into summer workouts with the University of Hawaii. So I was kind of, in the back of the pack, but it honestly didn't take me a long time to, get going. And I was still making all my times and on the conditioning tests, even when I first came back. But I was, still in the back of the pack. But yeah, it kind of took me a little bit to get going, but right now I feel great and probably the best shape I've ever been in my life.
Good stuff. So you mentioned how you're now at the University of Hawaii. I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, prior to your mission, you had committed to go to the University of Utah. How
Yeah.
did how Tell us a little bit about how the switch from Utah to Hawaii happened.
hmm Yeah. So it was about 2 months before, or maybe 3 months before, I was coming home from my mission, and all the University of Utah coaches, all the offensive staff, was let go, and so that included my receivers coach who recruited me, and so that my scholarship was in the air, and I didn't know if things were gonna pan out, who the new coach was gonna be, who they were gonna bring in. So when that happened, University of Hawaii, they always been in contact with me, ever since I left on my mission, and even when that process happened with the University of Utah. Coach Jared Ursula, he's also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter Day Saints, and he knows how missions work. And so he was actually the first person to text me, and we hopped on a call. My mission president, like, yeah, you can hop on a call with your coach. And he was just super supportive and knew he wanted me from the start, and I felt that love from the University of Hawaii. And um, just when that happened, I was like, yeah, this is where I need to be. This is my call home. And it was no other feeling when I came home on that plane, and I was home, and this is where I was gonna be. And it was just, it kind of all made sense at that moment.
Was there I mean, sounds like it was a positive and everything worked out for you. Was there any disappointment in not being able to go to the University of Utah and play with your brother who is now playing there?
Mhm. Yeah, it was kind of hard, disappointing that I kind of wanted to play with him, but now talking with him, he wanted to carve his own path, because in high school it kind of was like, oh, the younger brother of Kaikai, or his older brother Kaikai doing great things. But so he was kind of living under my shadow for a while, even from a young age. And so he kind of wanted to carve his own path, and now he's playing offense. Actually, he was a safety in high school, and they moved him to slot receiver and also punt returner there at Utah. And that's exactly the position I play in. So it kind of would have been hard because we would be battling for the same spot, and maybe that would have ended up pretty bad just with competition going. But now seeing him succeed, and he had a great season last year, and setting his own legacy and his own cementing his own path. I'm just super happy for him, and I think that's what God wanted for us and our family, and it kind of worked out in that way.
Well, as a lifelong University of Hawaii fan and a BYU alum, I have no problem with you not going to Utah. Trust
Yeah.
me. I am happy. I'm happy to have you. And what's it been like? I know when Coach Timmy Chang, came to his position, his current position, he
Mhm.
introduced this concept of the Braddahhood. What's that been
Yeah.
like to join the Braddahhood?
Man, it's real. The brotherhood is real. It's a feeling kind of like back home where you're playing for the community, but this time you're playing for the state. There's no pro team in Hawaii, and so he he emphasizes that this program is what holds the state together, and we represent more than just ourselves, our families, but we represent our culture, the state of Hawaii, like you mentioned. And so that brotherhood of we're doing a lot of service projects this off season. We just went to an elementary school. We went to Kahana to air layer some ulu trees for the people affected by the floods. And he's really introducing this concept of the brotherhood of ingraining with the community and ingraining with the state, but also with the players in the team and the program.
I I wanted to ask you a little bit about NIL, name, image, and
Mhm.
likeness. How does that work for an athlete at UH?
Yeah, so NIL, it's the name of the game now. Players are getting paid, and um, those bigger schools are getting paying to get a lot of good players. But the NIL at UH is it's growing. It's definitely something that Timmy is taking more seriously, and the state is also taking into consideration. And so we get like a revenue share from the school, the like select players who are receiving an NIL, and so it comes. That money is distributed from the school, and it comes, and yeah, we get a monthly check, I guess, of whatever the school is giving you.
Yeah, like you said, it's the name of the game and really the way for schools to stay
Mhm.
competitive. Another thing that's really changed the landscape of college athletics and especially college football is the transfer portal. What do you think of the
Yeah.
transfer portal?
Yeah, there's a lot of I have a lot of thoughts on the transfer portal, but it's good that players can go, and if they don't fit into a program, or if they don't fully think that that place is right for them, that they have the opportunity to transfer schools and to get better opportunities at different places. Um, but for me, I think loyalty and just connections and people are super important now in this day and age. And so um, being rooted and being loyal to a program is super important for me and my beliefs. um, and yeah, that's my stand on the transfer portal.
Yeah, so you came back from your mission. You had a red shirt season, I believe, last year, right?
Yes. Hmm.
So, what are your hopes? You mentioned you're feeling like you're in great shape. What are your hopes and your goals for this upcoming season, which essentially is going to be your freshman season, right?
Yes, so this will be my redshirt freshman season. And I'm looking to do big things this season. um, we had a lot of success last year, and I got to learn from great guys, older guys like Pofele Ashlock, and Nick Senecal that played in the slot as well, who's getting ready for the draft. And so that learning experience kind of helped me learn the offense and to learn. how to get open and to function in the system. And yeah, this year it's looking a lot better, and I'm healthy now. I was kind of dealing with injuries last year, but this year I feel healthy, and yeah, looking to do some special things this upcoming season.
What is your daily schedule like as a Division One football player? I mean, I don't know, like I don't know if people really can appreciate. I mean, because most people, if they played sports in high school, they went to
Mhm.
practice for 2 or 3 hours after school and it was done. But what's a typical day like for you?
Yeah, so we practice early in the morning, 5:55 start, and people say they want to do it, but when you're going day in and day out in this schedule, it's rough sometimes. But luckily, I'm an early bird, so 5:55 is not too bad for me. So we practice from 5:55 and we end about 10:30. That includes like lifting. In that time block, we lift, and we have practice, and then we have team meetings also in that time block. So that that bangs out the morning, and then after that from 10:30 on is class in school. um I have two in-person classes that I have to attend and three online classes, and so just getting that work done. And then about 4 o'clock or three around there is you go back for watch film with your coaches in your position meetings. And then in that time block you also have to find time to get recovery in, get your food in, get your meals in. And so it's a lot on the plate, but that's the schedule that we go through as athletes, student athletes.
Tell me about you mentioned how it took a little bit to get your body back feeling, after the mission, recovering and getting back in shape. What's the transition been like? Because you're on a mission and you're out, sharing, what you believe with people and all that, and you're in a very, I would say, a very protected or clean
Hmm.
environment. And then you go out on the football field, and football fields are, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the case at University of Hawaii, but football
Uh-huh.
fields are notorious for a lot of yelling, maybe even some
Yep.
profanity. And
Yep.
so what's that transition been like for you?
Hmm. So at the University of Hawaii, we're a really faith-based team, and it starts from our head coach, and my position coach. He's a member of the church, and um, that helps a lot. You know, um, you're with your position coach almost half the day, right? With individual indie at practice, position meetings. Um, just extra film watching with him, and having someone that shares the same beliefs, and having someone that I know is a part of the church. It's a great feeling. It's a different feeling, um, that we can connect on. And so yes, football is notorious, and it's a nasty, cruel game, um, but we also have strong leaders and individuals who care about their faith and take it really seriously. And so it's been such a smooth transition for me.
That's great to hear. It sounds like the transition from what you originally committed to do coming out of high
Hmm.
school, and it's really worked out great for you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd be disappointed in myself if I didn't ask you a question about the Tokyo Toe, Kansei Matsukawa.
I'm saying.
You being a someone of Japanese descent and also
Hmm.
serving your mission in Japan. I'm
Hmm.
guessing you probably have a pretty cool and unique relationship with Kansei Matsukawa. Tell us about him and what your relationship is like with him.
Yeah, I mean, his story is so unique and so powerful. He came from nothing. He really came from nothing. He was rock bottom, and he had the opportunity to go to Ohio, kick, learn from YouTube, and then make his way to Hawaii. And yeah, our relationship was special. The first day I came, walked into the locker room, his eyes lit up because he heard that, oh, a kid coming back from his mission from Japan is coming. Um, and the first time I talked with him, he was so happy that he could finally speak Japanese to someone because he, speaking English with all our teammates, and just seeing that side of him open up was something special. Um, and yeah, we have a unique relationship. We would hang out a lot. I would take him to the North Shore, come meet with my family, and just have that family atmosphere and that feeling because he was away from home and I knew he missed home and the food, especially. And so having my mom cook for him and just him inviting me to different events and functions, and just finding common grounds with just the language, but also his story and where he came from was something that I could connect on. And so it was cool to see him just have that special season, and now hopefully he gets drafted maybe today or tomorrow, and that'd be amazing.
Yeah, like you said, what an amazing story. I wanted to, one thing I forgot to ask you earlier, I was curious about, did your parents teach you guys any Japanese? Like, what was your Japanese
Mm.
speaking level before you went on your mission?
Yeah, so when I was little, we would go to Japan summer school every summer. And so I was immersed in the language. I think I only spoke Japanese when I was from 0 to about age 5.
Oh, wow.
And so that was like my first language was Japanese. And then we kind of got into elementary, and we started falling behind on our English skills. And so my dad was made that decision, was like, hey, we're going to put our kids in universities in America, and so we should focus more on English. And so that's where English took over. And we kind of spoke Japanese in the house still here and there. My mom still had her phrases in Japanese, and so we understood what she was saying. But when we got a little older, from maybe elementary level to high school level, it just kind of it transitioned into more English, and our comprehension was there, but the speaking wasn't really there. And so when I went out on the mission, I kind of understood a lot of things, by the speaking was the thing that I had to work on.
Gotcha. Well, you mentioned your dad and your uncle, and me being over here on Kauai. A lot of
Mhm.
us know the Carvalho family as a very involved family when it comes to sports. I see your grandpa. He's still
Yeah,
refereeing basketball and
yeah.
volleyball games. I think when I talked to him, he's been doing it for over 45 years. You have, of course, your uncle and your dad. You've got your uncle Sheldon, who's coached at the collegiate level in volleyball. You got your cousin Alyssa over here on Kauai, who's one of the top sports photographers on our island. What?
Mhm.
Tell me about the family legacy for you guys in sports. Like, why is sports so important to the Carvalho family?
Yeah, I think that's what brings us together as a family. It's our passion, it's our drive. And so when we play sports, it brings our families together. Like I remember, growing up and my grandparents coming to my games, or just families coming together and watching us perform. It brings us closer together as a family. And sports has been, like you said, it runs deep in the family. Um, and just seeing them still pursuing sports, and my grandpa and my uncles, they're all super heavily involved. It just it kind of just has been our lifestyle, and we maybe we don't know any better, but that's just how we were raised, and it, like I said, it just brings us together closer as a family.
Well, very good. We've gone a little longer than I promised you, so I appreciate
No
you. I
worries.
appreciate all the great answers, and we've had a great conversation. But before we close
Mhm.
out, I have a few quick hit, kind of just quick answer, one, two
Mhm.
word answers for you. Okay, you
Okay.
ready?
Yep.
All right. So, who is the best Kahuku football player ever, not with the last name Carvalho?
Oh, I would say for me, Mark Atuaya.
Ooh, Marky
Marky.
Atuaya.
Yeah.
I know Marky very well. I'm going to say my favorite Kahuku football player ever was his classmate, a guy by the name of Itula Mili.
Lameli. Wow.
Itula Mili was a fantastic athlete in high school, went on to BYU and then Seattle
Yep.
Seahawks. Okay, next
Yep.
question. Who was or who is your favorite teammate ever?
Favorite teammate ever. Wow. I would say Leonard Ayew.
Leonard Ayew, who I believe, where is he now?
He's at the University of Michigan. Oh, Michigan State University. Yep.
Michigan State, and he went on a mission as well, right?
He also went on a mission. Yes.
Where did he serve?
He served in Samoa.
In Samoa, right on.
Yep.
Okay, so another one. Who is the best athlete from the Carvalho family?
I'm biased. I would say myself.
Right on. Hey, you know what? I would have to say you or your brother. Definitely better. Definitely
Yeah.
better than Uncle Merrill and your dad and your uncle. No. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then my last question for you. Of course, you have Kauai roots over here. Lots of family here. What's your favorite thing to do when you come to the island of Kauai?
I really love fishing. Bass fishing is fun. My uncles take me, so I'd say fishing or jet skiing down the Nepali coast.
Nice, nice. Well, Kaikai, like I said, I held you on the phone a little longer than I promised, but I really appreciate. This has been a wonderful discussion. I appreciate you giving your time here. Any last words for everybody out there?
Nah, I appreciate you having me here today, and yeah, just shout out my family, and love you guys, and I'm hoping to do good things for this upcoming year.
All right. Well, good luck and thank you for joining the podcast today, Kaikai.
Yes, thank you.
I absolutely enjoyed my conversation with Kaikai Carvalho. What an amazing young man. I want to thank him and I want to thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on the Respect with Matt Gonsalves podcast.